The stench of garbage and darkness. That's about what I felt when my daughter-in-law came up behind me and put a trash can over my head. Fish, vegetables, grease were running down on me. And all this right after my husband's funeral. If you've never heard a room go silent around you while you're standing there with a trash can wedged over your ears, take my word for it. It sounds like pressure, like the air is squeezing your skull from the inside. I remember the weight of it first. A big, black plastic can from their kitchen, still half full. I'd bent down to pick up a dropped fork from the floor in their dining room, and then, whoomp, darkness and the thick smell of day-old shrimp and God knows what else. Someone snorted. I heard that through the plastic. Then I heard her laugh. "Lighten up, Marilyn," my daughter-in-law, Kelsey, said from somewhere above me. "It's just a joke." I was 65 years old. My husband had been in the ground less than 6 hours. I still had his cologne on my sweater. But sure, a joke. I tried to lift the can off, but something heavy slid against my cheek. Coffee grounds, potato salad, a cold, greasy noodle, and I froze. For a second, I was terrified that if I moved too fast, the whole thing would just dump down the neck of my blouse. "Kelsey," my son said sharply. His voice was closer than I expected. "What the hell?" She giggled. "Oh my God, Mark, it's funny. She's been moping around here like a ghost all day. I'm just trying to lighten the mood. Right, Marilyn?" I finally got my fingers under the rim and shoved the can up and off. Light and sound crashed back. Everyone in the dining room, neighbors, church ladies, a few of Mark's friends, the pastor's wife, were staring at me like I'd done something wrong. There was a strand of lettuce stuck to my hair. Someone had already raised their phone. I set the trash can down very carefully, like it might explode, and forced myself to stand up straight. My knees hurt. I am not a tall woman, and at that moment, I felt about 4 feet high. I looked at my son. He looked away first. "I'm going to go home," I said. "But Mom, people just got here," Mark said. "We did all this for Dad." No, they did all this for the show of it, for the catering, for the social media posts about grief and community and celebrating Tom's life. "I'm tired," I said. "Enjoy your party." "It's not a party," he snapped, stung. Behind him, Kelsey rolled her eyes and started lifting the trash can like she might do it again. "You do that," I said evenly, pointing at her, "and I swear to you, Kelsey, you won't like what happens next." She smirked. It was a little twist to the left side of her mouth, like she was trying not to laugh in church. She'd given me that same look the first time we met. "I'm terrified," she said, the sarcasm dripping. "Oh no, the retired school secretary is going to write me a stern email." A couple of people tittered. I picked up my purse from the chair by the wall and walked out of my own son's house with potato salad juice drying on my face. I live in a ranch house in a quiet subdivision outside Columbus, Ohio. Brick, 3 bedrooms, built in the late 70s. Tom and I bought it when Mark was 10. We scrimped and saved and refinanced once to help pay for his college. By the time I got home from the gathering after the funeral, that's what the pastor called it, the sun was barely going down. The sky was this dull November gray, like the color they paint waiting rooms. I went straight to the bathroom, turned on the shower, and sat on the edge of the tub while the water warmed up. I'd been crying off and on for 3 weeks. So by then, the tears came out mostly out of habit. They were thin and tired. My eyes hurt. Tom was dead. That fact sat in the center of my chest like a cinder block. But that wasn't the only thing there. Not anymore. Something else was starting to grow around it, wrapping itself around the grief like a vine. Anger. Not screaming, throw a plate anger. I've never been that kind of woman. No, this was colder, finer, like someone had just drawn a line in ink down the floor and I'd finally decided which side I was going to stand on. I showered. I scrubbed at my scalp, thinking about Kelsey's laugh. I thought about the smirk. I thought about my son looking away while his wife publicly humiliated me in the middle of my widowhood. And, because I'm honest with myself if nothing else, I thought about how we got here. This didn't start with the trash can.
It started the first time Mark brought Kelsey home 10 years earlier, on a hot 4th of July afternoon when the cicadas were screaming in the trees, and I was still naive enough to think that love automatically made people kind. Tom and I were married 42 years. He was a mechanical engineer, the kind of man who saved receipts and labeled envelopes and cleaned the grill after every use. I was the school secretary at our local middle school for 30 years. I knew every kid, every parent, and which teachers drank in their cars at lunch. We were boring in the best possible way. Mark was our only child. We weren't perfect parents, but we were steady. He got braces, soccer cleats, piano lessons. We had Friday pizza nights and arguments about curfews. I still have the hole in the drywall from where he flung his backpack senior year because I wouldn't let him drive to Florida for spring break. We loved him fiercely. Maybe too fiercely. Maybe the kind of fierce that gets blind if you're not careful. He met Kelsey when he was 28 and she was 26. She worked in marketing, which, near as I can tell, means she had a ring light and an Instagram account and took pictures of herself next to things. "That's not fair, Mom," Mark said when I made that joke once. "She works really hard." She worked hard at being seen. I'll give her that. Kelsey was pretty in that carefully edited way. Fake eyelashes, acrylic nails, hair that had clearly met a flat iron. I'm not mocking. I just noticed. I noticed details. It's what secretaries and mothers do. She walked into my kitchen the first time wearing shoes that cost more than our mortgage payment used to be, and handed me a store-bought cheesecake with a price sticker still half on. "Hi, Mrs. Dawson," she said in this bright, sugary voice. "I am so excited to finally meet you. Mark talks about you all the time." I smiled and took the cheesecake. "Nice to meet you too, Kelsey. And it's Marilyn. Mrs. Dawson makes me feel like I should be writing you up for chewing gum in the hallway." She laughed, a little too loud. "Oh my God, you're hilarious," she said, already turning away from me to put her phone on the counter. She climbed onto a stool, fluffed her hair, and said, "Babe, take a story of us. First time at my future in-law's house," she sing-songed. It was the third sentence out of her mouth. I remember Tom catching my eye over her head and giving me this half shrug that said, "Well, this is who we picked." Fine, I thought. People post everything online now. I can roll with it. I can roll with a lot, as it turns out. At first, I did what I'd always done. I observed. I listened. I tried to like the woman my son loved. I noticed how she never offered to help with the dishes, but would happily rearrange my table settings and say it was for the aesthetic. I noticed how she called my homemade pot roast very rustic, like she'd just tasted squirrel stew. I noticed the way Mark changed around her, how he laughed a little louder, bragged a little more, and flinched when I mentioned money. "Mom, don't tell her about the 529 account," he hissed at me once when I started to say that we'd started saving for future grandkids' college a long time ago. "Why not?" I asked, genuinely puzzled. "It's good news." "Because she'll think there's like a big pile of money somewhere we're not using," he muttered. "Just please, okay?" That was my first real warning sign. And like most mothers, I saw the sign, took note of it, and then decided love could fix things. Love and patience and homemade pie. Idiot. Fast forward 10 years. Mark and Kelsey got married, had 2 children, my grandbabies, Emma and Liam, bought a big house in a newer subdivision with an HOA that cares more about mailbox height than community. Kelsey started some kind of branding consultancy from home. Mark worked his way into middle management at an insurance company. They posted everything. First house keys, positive pregnancy tests, gender reveal cake, Christmas matching pajamas. Tom and I liked being grandparents. We helped with diapers and babysitting, and the occasional week of them staying with us in the summer when daycare was closed. But over the years, little things piled up. Like Kelsey joking about how poor we were. "Mark says you guys never took him to Disney," she said once at Thanksgiving, swirling her wine. "Like, ever." Can you imagine?
I would have just died if my parents had deprived me like that. We took him camping, I said. He loved it. She smiled with one corner of her mouth, that same little smirk. Sure, she said. It's just so different now, you know? We want to give our kids more. Or how she would rephrase everything I said in front of the kids. If I said, "We can't buy every toy we see, sweetheart. We have to save our money for important things," she'd swoop in with, "What Nana means is money is stressful for some people, but Daddy and Mommy work really hard so we don't have to worry, right?" Or how she insisted on hosting every holiday, even though her idea of hosting was buying trays from Costco and paying some girl from Instagram to set up balloon arches in the shape of a turkey. She'd tell me, "You don't need to cook, Marilyn. You just relax and enjoy. Isn't that better?" In this tone that made cook sound like scratch at the dirt with a spoon. Tom and I didn't like her either, though he tried. "She's ambitious," he said once, trying to be diplomatic. "She's a black hole with acrylic nails," I muttered as we did their dishes alone, while everyone else sat in the living room taking selfies. "You're not wrong," he sighed. "But she's who he picked." He started getting sick 3 years ago. Heart failure, slow and humiliating. I watched the man who used to carry me over puddles sit down halfway up our front steps and pretend he was just checking his phone. Mark was there, to his credit. He came to appointments when he could. He helped fix up the bathroom so we could put in grab bars. He called and asked me how I was. "Kelsey? Well, she posted about caring for aging in-laws once. There was a photo of her holding a mug, staring out a window as if she were in a commercial for antidepressants. The caption talked about the emotional labor of being the default caregiver and ended with, 'Hug your caregivers tighter. We are not okay.'" She had been at our house exactly twice in that month, both times for under an hour. She spent most of that time sitting on the couch, scrolling her phone, while Mark and I got Tom into his recliner. I didn't say anything. I had learned by then that you don't tell a narcissist they're selfish. You just quietly take note and hide anything you care about. What I didn't know, at the time, was that the thing I should have been hiding wasn't the good china. It was the money. Tom and I were never rich. We were Midwestern comfortable. The house was paid off. We had decent retirement accounts. Tom had a life insurance policy through his job. Years of living below our means had added up to what I would call enough but not excessive. Enough to help our grandkids, enough to keep me out of poverty, enough to tempt. We talked a lot about the will once Tom got his diagnosis. "I don't want to leave Mark a big lump sum," he said firmly, sitting at the kitchen table with his reading glasses sliding down his nose. "Not with her in the picture." "You don't think he could handle it?" I asked, a little defensive on our son's behalf. "I think he could. I don't think she would let him. You've seen the way she talks about money. It's never enough. It's never going to be enough." He was right. If their current lifestyle was any indication, leased SUVs, new furniture every year, private preschool for kids who ate paste, they were already at the edge. "So what do we do?" I asked. "We help the kids directly," he said. "We set up accounts for the grandkids' education. We make sure you're taken care of. And the rest, I want to give it away." "To who?" "Real charities. Scholarships, food banks, that literacy program you like. I've had a good life. I don't need a marble bench with my name on it. I'd rather pay for some kids' textbooks." I looked at him, the stubborn, good man I'd shared a bed with for 40 decades, and I said, "Okay, then that's what we'll do." We met with a lawyer. We set so much aside for me, clearly and explicitly. The house, my pension, a portion of the investments. We set up 529 accounts for Emma and Liam, with me as the primary account holder and Mark as contingent. It was a solid sum, enough that if it grew decently, those kids could graduate debt-free from a state school. The rest, and the rest was more than I'd realized once all the numbers were laid out, we left to charity.
a list of organizations Tom and I felt strongly about.
It made him visibly lighter, signing that final page. Feels like tithing on my way out, he said in the parking lot, leaning on his cane. Kelsey's going to kill me, I joked weakly. Don't tell them, he said, not until I'm gone. It's my money, Marilyn. I earned it, and I trust you to stick to this when I'm not here to insist. I wish now that I had insisted we bring Mark in on those conversations. I wish we'd had one ugly argument then instead of the prolonged war that came later. But hindsight is just smug regret. At the time, it seemed kinder to spare him the conflict until it was necessary. Tom died on a Tuesday afternoon in October, with the sun coming through the bedroom blinds in little stripes like a zebra. I held his hand. Mark was on the other side of the bed. Kelsey claimed she couldn't handle seeing tubes, so she'd stayed home with the kids and posted a black square on Instagram with a quote about grief. I'm not making that up. The week after the funeral was a blur of casseroles and folded chairs and paperwork. I moved like someone underwater. Everything was slow and too bright and slightly distorted. We had the will reading at the lawyer's office on the following Monday. It was me, Mark, and Kelsey. She wore sunglasses indoors, like she was trying out for a reality show about widows. Our lawyer, Mr. Randall, was an older man with patchy white hair and the patience of a saint. He'd been with us through the whole process. He cleared his throat and read the will in that formal, legal voice. It started with the usual, debts, funeral expenses. Then he got to the distributions. The house and certain accounts to me, the grandkids' education funds, and then the rest in percentages to a list of charities. I felt Mark stiffen next to me. Wait, he said, interrupting. That's it? Mr. Randall paused, looked over his glasses. That's what your father signed. Yes, he said gently. He and your mother discussed this at some length. Kelsey took off her sunglasses. Her eyes were dry and sharp. What about Mark? She asked, her voice thin and high. He doesn't get anything? He gets the legacy of two hardworking parents who gave him a good childhood, I said quietly. She turned on me so fast I could practically feel the air move. Excuse me? She snapped. There are also the 529 accounts, Mr. Randall interjected smoothly. Your children's education is fully funded, assuming prudent management. That's not for Mark, she said. That's for the kids. That's completely different. It's for his children, I said. Your family, Kelsey. That's what your father-in-law wanted. Her face was turning an interesting shade of blotchy pink. Mark just sat there, stunned, his jaw clenched. So let me get this straight, she said, jabbing a manicured finger at the papers on the desk. You guys decided, all on your own, to give away, what, hundreds of thousands of dollars to strangers, and your only son gets nothing? Don't say you guys, like I forged his signature, I said, my own temper starting to rise. It was Tom's money. He worked for it. This is what he wanted. And you just went along with it? She demanded. You didn't tell him? You didn't tell us? You just nodded and smiled and let him rob his own family? Hey, Mark said sharply, don't talk about Dad like that. Then say something, she hissed at him. You sat there and let them screw us over. Us. Not you. Us. I watched my son's face as that word sunk in. I watched his grief twist into something sharper, something uglier. Why didn't you tell me? He asked me, his voice low and wounded. Why didn't you at least ask what I thought? Because it wasn't your money, and because your father knew that Kelsey would do exactly this. His eyes flashed. So this is my wife's fault now? He said. You think she's some kind of gold digger or something? I said nothing. My silence answered everything. Jesus, Mom, he said, standing up so fast his chair scraped. He didn't leave me anything. He left you a childhood without hunger. He left you college without debt. He left you your first car. He left you 10 grand for your wedding when you decided balloons were more important than invitations. He left your kids a future. How much more do you want? A share, Kelsey said coldly. That's how inheritance works.
You don't just cut out your only child because you got brainwashed by some charity fundraiser. I stared at her. You think feeding hungry kids is brainwashing? I asked. She rolled her eyes. Don't do that, she said. Don't make this moral. This is about family. And you've made it very clear, she glared at me, what your priorities are.
Mr. Randall tried to smooth things over. He talked about how these decisions are never easy, how Tom was very firm, how there were options if Mark felt strongly about contesting the will. Kelsey latched onto that like a shark smelling blood. "Can we?" she asked. "Can we contest? This doesn't feel legitimate. I mean, he was sick, right? Was he even in his right mind when he signed this?" "He was absolutely competent," Randall said stiffly. "I would not have gone forward otherwise." I could feel my heart racing. My hands were shaking. I hadn't eaten that day. I wanted to go home and climb into bed and pretend none of this was happening. Instead, I watched my son's face harden into something I didn't recognize. "We'll think about it," he said to the lawyer, not looking at me. "We'll need copies of everything." "Of course," Mr. Randall said. The meeting ended. Kelsey walked out without saying goodbye. Mark paused at the door, his hand on the frame, his shoulders tense. "You should have told me," he said quietly, not turning around. "Your father asked me not to," I said. "He didn't want to fight with you while he was dying. He wanted his last months with you to be about memories, not money." He flinched like I'd slapped him. "And I'm just supposed to be okay with this?" he whispered. "No, you're supposed to be an adult about this." He laughed once, bitter. "Right," he said. "Well, enjoy your charitable glow, Mom." Then he left too. And that was how I became, in the space of an hour, a widow and a villain. The humiliation after the will reading might have been bearable if it had stopped there, if we'd had some shouting, a few months of cold shoulders, and then slowly, painfully, found our way back to each other. But Kelsey wasn't going to let that happen. She had found her narrative. I was the greedy, controlling mother who had convinced her poor, sick husband to donate their rightful inheritance to strangers. And like all good influencers, once she found a story that got engagement, she leaned into it. She started small, snide comments about how some people get to be comfortable in retirement when the topic of money came up at dinner, little digs about how Mark is so stressed because he has to provide for everyone now, not like your generation that just lived on pensions. She weaponized history. Every good thing we'd done for Mark became, in her retelling, evidence of our selfishness. "They didn't send you to Disney because they spent it all on themselves," she told him one night when she thought I couldn't hear. "They went on cruises, right? They had the money. They just didn't want to waste it on you." We had gone on one cruise for our 35th anniversary, paid for with a payout from some old savings bond. I started seeing less of my grandkids. "We're just so busy," she'd say when I asked to have them over. "They've got dance and t-ball and play dates. It's hard to fit in another thing." Another thing. I was another thing. Mark started canceling our weekly Sunday dinners. First it was, "We're slammed," then, "The kids are sick," then nothing, just silence. I'd call, he'd answer less. I'd text, he'd reply with a thumbs up or not at all. Then the posts started. Kelsey posted a photo of herself and Mark on the couch, her head on his shoulder, his face tired. The caption read, "Sometimes family hurts you worse than strangers ever could. Proud of this man for breaking cycles. We'll build our own legacy. Hashtag chosen family. Hashtag breaking generational trauma." I almost threw my phone. Generational trauma? From what? Stable housing and a packed lunch? She did one of those long storytime posts that vaguely referenced a parent who stole our inheritance and betrayed us at our most vulnerable, without using my name. But she didn't have to. We lived in a small town. People knew. At church, I started getting looks, pitying, gossipy, and sharp. Someone actually said, "I heard there was drama with the estate. Such a shame at your age." Like I'd stolen the communion wine. I wanted to scream. I did not scream.
I went home, made myself a cup of tea, and wrote down everything that was happening in a little spiral notebook I kept in the kitchen drawer. Date, time, what was said, who was there. Old secretary habits die hard. And then came the trash can. The gathering after the funeral was Kelsey's idea.
We need to do something nice, she told me on the phone while I was trying to figure out how many black dresses I owned. People expect that. We can't just send them home from the cemetery with nothing. It looks cheap. It's not a wedding, I said, too exhausted to argue. It's a celebration of life, she snapped back. We want people to remember Dad fondly. She'd started calling Tom Dad more in those last months. It was never affectionate. It was a brand. She offered to host. What she meant was she would hire a caterer and a balloon lady and boss Mark around while he moved chairs. By the time I got to their house after the burial, there were chafing dishes of food, a slideshow of photos on their giant TV, and a sign on an easel that said, "In loving memory of Thomas Dawson, a life well lived," in faux calligraphy. My husband's death made Canva worthy. I moved through the room like a ghost. People hugged me and said all the things people say. He's in a better place. At least he's not suffering. Call if you need anything. Mark hugged me once, awkwardly, then disappeared to refill people's drinks. Kelsey floated around in a black dress that looked like it cost more than my car. Her hair perfect, her makeup flawless. She cried photogenically. She looked at me like I was a stain on her couch. At one point, I dropped a fork. It clattered under the buffet table. I bent down to pick it up. And then 42 years of marriage, 3 decades of hard work, 19 years of motherhood, and 3 weeks of acute grief got capped off with the sour stench of trash and the sound of my daughter-in-law laughing. That was my line. Wet lettuce in my hair was what did it. People talk about snapping like it's sudden. Like one day you're meek and mild, and the next you're throwing cars. That's not how it felt to me. It felt like finally finishing a long math problem in my head. I went home that night, made a list, and circled one word at the top of the page. Kelsey. Mark was my son. I still loved him even when I hated what he was doing. Kelsey, on the other hand, had made herself very clear. She wanted a villain, and she'd picked me. Fine. I have been blamed for worse things than I've done in my life. For once, I decided I was going to earn it. Like I said, I noticed things. Over 10 years, I had noticed Kelsey always had new clothes, new gadgets, new decor, even when Mark complained about money. She once accidentally mentioned a client dinner when she was supposed to have been at a networking conference in another city. When I asked later how the conference was, she blinked at me like she'd forgotten which lie she'd told. She signed packages for Mark when he wasn't home and then told him nothing had arrived. Once, when Emma was 3, she brought over a folder of mail by accident in a grocery bag. A credit card bill had Mark's name on it, but a mailing address I didn't recognize. I also knew from years at the school front desk that people will tell secrets to anyone who looks like they're just there to listen. I started small. I called my friend Susan, who worked at the bank. Off the record, I said, what happens if someone opens a credit card in their spouse's name without them really knowing the details? She whistled low. Identity theft, technically, she said, unless they can prove it was all above board. Why? You finally going on a shopping spree, Mayor? Something like that, I said. I went through every old text thread and email I had with Kelsey. I looked for any mention of money, cards, accounts. I highlighted them, printed them, and put them in a folder. I checked the county court website, the way we used to do at the school when we suspected a parent might have a custody order. You'd be surprised how much is public if you know where to look. I searched Kelsey's maiden name. There it was. A small claims case from 6 years ago. A credit card company suing her for unpaid debt. It had been dismissed after payment. I searched again, this time with just her first and last name, no middle initial. Another case. This time it was a former employer suing her for breach of contract. Settled out of court. Interesting. I printed what I could. I made notes. I talked to my neighbor, Linda, who worked part-time at the preschool Emma used to attend. Didn't Kelsey do some kind of branding work for the school once? I asked, casually, over coffee. Linda rolled her eyes so hard, I thought they'd get stuck. "Oh my God, yes," she said. "She came in here like some big shot consultant, charged us a ridiculous fee to refresh our image, and then ghosted halfway through. The director was livid." "Did she pay her?" I asked. "Most of it," Linda said. "She threatened to sue when we tried to stop the last payment, said we were ruining her reputation. I swear, that woman is a walking lawsuit." I wrote that down too. I know a woman from church, Beth, who had briefly done some social media work with Kelsey. I invited her over to go through some of Tom's old books and then gently steered the conversation. "How's that marketing company of Kelsey's doing?" I asked, once we'd cried enough over our husbands. Hers had died 5 years before. Grief veterans recognize each other. "Is she still doing influencer coaching?" Beth snorted. "Last I heard, half her clients were complaining that she took their money and didn't deliver. But you didn't hear that from me." "Of course not," I said. "Would they have anything in writing?" Beth hesitated, then lowered her voice. "Well, there was this one woman, Karina, who tried to warn me about working with her. She said she'd had to threaten a chargeback with the credit card company. I can give you her number if you want to, steer clear." I smiled. The kind of smile you give a student who just gave you exactly the right answer. "I'd appreciate that," I said. I called Karina the next day. I told her who I was. I told her I wasn't looking to start drama, that I just wanted to understand who my son had married. She talked for 40 minutes straight about how Kelsey had promised her a full rebrand, website, photo shoot, and months of coaching for an outrageous fee. About how she'd delivered 2 Zoom calls and a collection of Canva templates anyone could have downloaded for free. About how, when Karina pushed back, Kelsey accused her of sabotaging a woman-owned business and threatened to mobilize her network against her. "I ended up going to my bank," Karina said. "I showed them the contract and the emails, and they reversed the charges. I heard she got flagged by the payment processor. But she's slippery. She always twists things." "Do you still have those emails?" I asked. "Yeah," she said slowly. "Why?" "Because," I said, "my daughter-in-law put a trash can on my head at my husband's funeral, and I'm tired." There was a pause. Then Karina said, "I'll forward you everything." By the end of that week, I had copies of 2 settled lawsuits with Kelsey's name on them, several email threads from former clients complaining about her shady business practices, screenshots of public reviews she managed to get taken down which people had saved out of spite. The uneasy start of a suspicion. That suspicion solidified when I went to the mailbox one afternoon and found an envelope from a credit card company addressed to Mark at my house. He'd used our address for some things in college and never changed them back. Old habits. I stared at the envelope. I shouldn't open it. I knew that. But I am a mother. And mothers sometimes read things they shouldn't to protect the people they love. I opened it carefully with a butter knife. It was a notice about a late payment. The balance was high, very high. And the purchases listed on the last page were enlightening. Salon charges, boutique clothing, online beauty subscriptions, a photography studio that did branding shoots. Nothing about this screamed Mark, who buys khakis on clearance and cuts his own hair in the garage. I copied down the card's last 4 digits and put the letter back exactly how I'd found it. Then I went to my own files and pulled out something from the 529 accounts. The paperwork showed the current balance. Lower than I'd expected. I called the plan administrator. After I got through the layers of automated menus and holds, I finally spoke to a human. "I'm just checking on my grandkids' accounts. There seem to have been some withdrawals I don't recognize." The woman on the line was kind, but firm. She explained that there had been a series of qualified withdrawals for educational expenses. She read off the amounts. "Educational expenses?" I repeated. "They're in 1st and 3rd grade."
"What educational expenses?" "Private school tuition, looks like," she said. She named a fancy academy I knew Kelsey had been bragging about. My stomach dropped. Tom and I had set those accounts up with the idea of college, We had said that, out loud, many times. They were not intended to pay for 8-year-olds to learn Mandarin in a building with a climbing wall. "Who requested the withdrawals?" I asked. "The account holder," she said. "Marilyn Dawson." "I did not," I said coolly. There was a pause. "Well, ma'am, someone did online using your login," she said. "We can send you the activity log if you'd like to review it." "Yes," I said. "Please do." 3 days later, I had the log. It showed that I had logged in multiple times from an IP address that was not mine, using a password that was no longer the one I'd originally set. I had never authorized anyone to do that. There are limits to what I'm going to say about the next part, because lawyers get very touchy about details. What I will say is, I went to Mr. Randall. I showed him the statements, the activity logs, and the credit card notice. I told him about Kelsey's history of debts and chargebacks. He frowned so hard his forehead disappeared. "This is concerning," he said carefully. "It looks like someone accessed these accounts without proper authorization." "Someone with manicured nails and a ring light," I said. He asked my permission to consult with a colleague who specialized in certain financial matters. I said yes. They explained options. Words like fraud, misappropriation, and identity theft hovered in the air like wasps. We talked about next steps, about documentation, about how to protect the remaining funds, about what would happen if this went further. I said I wanted to be careful. I did not want my grandkids caught in a legal crossfire. I did, however, want my daughter-in-law to feel the cold breath of consequences on her neck. So we made a plan. Revenge, when you're my age, is not about drama. It's about paperwork. It's about timing. And it's about audience. Kelsey's entire life was built around perception. She curated every moment. She lived and died by likes and comments and the illusion of the perfect life. If I'd called her up and screamed, she would have hung up and posted some vague meme about toxic elders. If I'd confronted her privately with the credit card and 529 logs, she would have cried and spun some story about miscommunication and then doubled down on making me look crazy. No. If you want to hit someone like Kelsey where it hurts, you don't yell. You show. You put evidence in front of the people whose opinions she feeds on. You make it so that when she opens her mouth to lie, she can see in their eyes that they already know the truth. I decided my audience would be threefold. Mark, her online world, the people and institutions she'd been fleecing. And I would not lift a single finger that put me on the wrong side of the law or of my own conscience. I began with Mark. I invited him to lunch. Just him. I texted, "Let's get lunch this Friday. Just the two of us. Neutral territory, my treat. Mom." He didn't answer right away. I expected that. The next day, he replied, "Kelsey says it's a bad idea. Says you'll try to manipulate me. But I want to hear your side. 1 hour. That's it." My son asking for my side, like I was a witness in a trial about my own life. I said, "Okay, 1 hour." We met at a little diner halfway between our houses. I picked it because it was public, familiar, and full of people I'd known since they were in braces. He walked in looking older. Grief does that. His hairline had crept back a bit. He had shadows under his eyes. "Hey," he said, sliding into the booth across from me, guarded. "Hi," I said. "You look tired." He shrugged. "Kids, work, wife, you know." He didn't say, "Dad dying," but it sat between us anyway. We ordered small talk, weather, the Buckeyes, the chicken pot pie special. Then he sat back, folded his arms, and said, "Okay, so what is this? You going to try to convince me you didn't screw me over?" I had brought a folder.
I laid it on the table and just rested my hand on it for a moment. "Mark," I said, "I am going to show you some things. You're not going to like them. They're going to hurt, but they're true. And you deserve to know the truth, even if it makes you hate me for a little while longer." He frowned, defensive. "If this is about the will again—" "It's not," I said. "We can talk about that too."
But this is about Kelsey and about your kids. His jaw tightened. You leave Kelsey out of this, he said. She's the only one who's been on my side about all of this. I slid the first set of papers across the table, the 529 logs. He glanced down, annoyed, then did a double take. "What am I looking at?" he asked. "Your kids' college funds," I said. "The ones Dad and I set up when Emma was born? You knew about those. We told you, more than once." "Yeah?" he said, wiping his hands on a napkin. "So?" "So," I said, tapping the withdrawals, "these are distributions that were made over the last 2 years to pay for private school tuition." He blinked. "What?" He looked up, frowning. "No, their school is on my credit card. I pay that." "You do," I agreed. "And so do the accounts. Look at the dates. Look at the announce." He scanned them more closely. His lips moved as he did the math. "Wait," he said slowly. "So you're saying the kids' college money is paying for elementary school? I thought it was just for, like, books later or something." "The accounts were set up specifically for college," I said. "We discussed that with you and Kelsey. The only way they should be used before then is if there is genuine, desperate need. There is no desperate need here. There is preference." He swallowed. I handed him the next sheet, the login activity showing my IP address magically teleporting across town. "This shows that someone changed the password and started making withdrawals from a different location," I said. "I didn't do that. I had to request a reset when I called. Whoever did that used my name to access funds that weren't theirs." He went pale. Are you accusing me?" he asked stiffly. "No," I said quietly. "I'm accusing your wife." His hand clenched on the paper. "You don't know that," he said. "She wouldn't." I pulled out the credit card notice. "Recognize these charges?" I asked. He scanned it. That's Kelsey's salon. And that boutique. She said she got those comped for— "Oh my God," he whispered. "Mark, how many credit cards do you have?" I don't know," he said. "She handles that. She says it's easier if one person manages the bills." "How many logins do you have for your own accounts? Could you, right now, without her, log in and see what your balances are?" He stared at me. That's not what this is about," he said, shaken. "We're talking about Dad's will, not my marriage." "We're talking about patterns," I said. "I'm not here to beat you over the head with the will. I'm here because I promised your father I would look out for you. And right now, the person you trust the most is stealing from her own children's future and using your name to do it." He sat there, breathing hard, staring at the papers like they might rearrange themselves into something more comfortable. "That's not possible," he whispered. "She wouldn't risk that. She loves the kids." "I think she loves what the kids let her post," and immediately regretted the bite in my tone. "Sorry, that was unkind. But Mark, loving someone doesn't mean you can't also hurt them. You know that. You've lived that. With me." He flinched. "Here," I said, sliding the next set of documents over. "The lawsuits, the emails from former clients, the reviews. Before you married her, she racked up debt she couldn't pay and got sued. Then she started this business and took money from people, didn't deliver, and threatened them when they pushed back. This isn't a one-time mistake. It's who she is. He read in silence. The clink of silverware and low hum of conversation went on around us. The waitress refilled our water glasses and gave me a look that said, "You okay, honey?" I nodded. Eventually, Mark put the packet down. "I need to ask her about this," he said, his voice low and tight. "Yes," I said, "you do. And when you do, she will likely cry. She will tell you that I'm trying to turn you against her. She will say I'm jealous, that I want to control you, that I've always hated her." He looked up slowly. The hurt in his eyes almost made me shove everything back in the folder and tell him to forget it. "Have you?" he asked. "Always hated her?" I took a breath. "I have never hated her. I have feared what she would do to you. I have disliked how she speaks to me. I have resented the way she uses you like a stage prop. But hate? No. Hate is too exhausting."
I'm too old for that. He huffed a low, unwilling laugh. "Here's what's going to happen," I continued. "You are going to go home with copies of these. You are going to talk to her. You're going to listen. And then, as you listen, you're going to compare what she says to the facts in front of you. Not to how you feel, not to how much you love her, to the facts." He nodded slowly. "And what are you going to do?" he asked. "Me?" I said. "I'm going to protect what's left of my grandkids' accounts. I'm going to alert the appropriate institutions that there has been unauthorized activity. I'm going to correct the narrative that I am the villain in this story, without trashing you in the process. And I'm going to drink a lot of tea." His mouth twisted. "What do you mean, correct the narrative?" he asked warily. I smiled, just a little. "You'll see," I said. We finished lunch quietly. When we stood to go, he hesitated, then hugged me. Quick, stiff, but real. "I'm sorry about the trash can," he muttered into my shoulder, sounding 12 again. "Are you?" I asked. "I should have stopped her," he said. I knew it was messed up. I just froze." "I know," I said. "Freezing is a trauma response. You can thaw later." He pulled back, blinking. "Where did you learn that?" he asked. "Grief group," I said. "You're not the only one who can read about generational trauma, you know?" For the first time in months, we both smiled at the same time. Then he left, clutching the folder like a life raft. Next audience. Her online world. I am not good at social media. I have a Facebook account because the PTA made me get one in 2009, and I never bothered to delete it. But I do know that narrative is everything there. Up until that point, I had not posted a single thing about the will. I had not responded to her vague posts or to the DMs from acquaintances asking if I was okay after what happened. I decided it was time. I sat down at my old desktop, put on my reading glasses, and wrote. Some of you have asked about rumors regarding my late husband's estate and my relationship with my son and his wife. Tom and I made a decision before he passed that reflected our values, to leave a portion of our savings to charity and to fund our grandchildren's education. Our son received decades of support from us in the form of housing, food, tuition, and financial help when he needed it. We are proud of what we were able to do for him. Unfortunately, it has come to my attention that funds intended exclusively for our grandchildren's future have been used without my knowledge or consent for other purposes. Legal and financial professionals are now involved in sorting that out. I will not engage in public arguments, but I will not be painted as a thief or abuser of my own family. If you have heard a different story, I encourage you to consider that there are always two sides, and that the quiet one is often the one handling the paperwork. Grief is hard enough without gossip. Please, be kind. I posted it. I turned off my phone. I went and watered my plants. When I turned my phone back on an hour later, I had a dozen messages. Some were from friends,
Good for you, Marilyn. We've always known you and Tom were generous. If you need a place to scream, my porch is open. Some were from people I hadn't spoken to in years who had apparently been reading Kelsey's posts and were now recalibrating. One, from Beth, simply said, "Oh, honey, you lit the match. I'll bring marshmallows." Within a day, Kelsey had posted a long, emotional response, without naming me, about how abusers twist things and money being stolen from under my nose, and how dare anyone suggest I would rob my own children. She overplayed her hand. People remembered my post about legal professionals being involved. And because I had not dragged her by name, because I had not called her a thief or a liar, because I had simply stated facts and appealed for kindness, the tide began, slowly, to turn. She got pushback in her comments for the first time. Little things like, "Maybe this isn't the place to air this," and "Have you tried therapy?" and "My parents help with my kids' tuition too, but I would never assume I was owed their savings." Her friends, the ones who had only ever seen the filtered version of her life, were now being presented with a less flattering angle. I didn't need to argue. I just needed to open the curtain a crack. The final audience was the institutions and people she'd been fleecing. I made a list. The 529 plan administrator, already alerted, the credit card company, the private school, her clients, her current employer, which was technically her own LLC, but she also had a contract doing social media for a local boutique and a dentist office. I won't go into procedural details. It's boring, and as I said, lawyers get itchy. I will say this. I filed a formal dispute with the plan administrator, stating that withdrawals had been made without my authorization and that I suspected misuse of funds. They took it very seriously. I contacted the credit card company's fraud department and explained that charges had been made by someone other than the primary cardholder, using a card mailed to an address that wasn't mine. They opened a case. I scheduled a meeting with the head of the private school, a woman I knew from PTA days. Sitting in her office with its tasteful diplomas and a miniature climbing wall visible out the window, I said, "Tom and I set up those accounts for college. We were happy to help if Mark and Kelsey had come to us and said, 'We can't afford this school, but it's important to us.' Instead, someone pretended to be me and took that money behind my back. I am not asking you for anything. I am asking you to be aware of the kind of behavior happening under your donor's roof." She went white. "I had no idea," she said. I thought you had blessed this. She told us it was part of their estate plan." "She tells a lot of people a lot of things," I said. The school, concerned about their own reputation, decided to review their financial aid and payment records. I did not have to suggest anything. I also, with permission from Karina and a few other former clients, helped them coordinate their complaints to the appropriate small business bureau and, where relevant, their banks. Some had already done that. Others hadn't realized they had options. I became, in the space of a month, not the villain in Kelsey's story, but the quiet hub of a growing circle of people she had wronged. I did not post about this. I did not scream. I just kept my spiral notebook updated, kept my lawyer looped in, and waited. When consequences started hitting, they did not trickle. They arrived like dominoes falling. It started at home. A week after our lunch, Mark called me late at night. I was in bed reading. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. "Mom?" he said when I answered. His voice sounded like it had when he broke his arm in 5th grade, thin and scared and furious. "What happened?" I asked, sitting up. "I confronted her," he said. "Like you said, I showed her the papers, the 529 withdrawals, the credit card, the lawsuits. She completely lost it. Said you hacked her, said you coerced her old boss, said you were jealous of her success." "Did she deny doing it?" I asked.
He laughed, a short, ugly laugh. She said she reallocated resources for the family, he said. She said I would have wasted the kids' college money on some boring state school, and she was investing in their future now. When I asked why she'd done it under your name, she said, because you're too passive to use the money properly. He was breathing fast. She admitted it, I said quietly. She admitted all of it and then told me I should be grateful, he said. When I pressed her, she started crying, said she was under so much pressure to keep up appearances, that her brand depended on their school, that people would judge us if we downgraded. Did you believe her? I asked. He was silent for a long time. I believed that she was scared, he said. Scared of looking poor, scared of being judged. I did not believe that justified stealing from our kids and lying to me for years. He swallowed. She said it was your fault, he added, that you set up this whole situation to make her look bad, that you've been out to get her since day one. I sighed. I expected that, I said. What did you say? I told her that if she mentioned you like that again, she could sleep at her mother's, he said. She screamed, threw a vase. The kids woke up. Emma was crying. Liam asked if we were getting a divorce. My heart clenched. What did you tell them? I asked. I told them Mommy and Daddy were having a big argument, but that we both loved them. Then I put them back to bed and sat in my car for 2 hours because I couldn't be in the same room with her without wanting to, I don't know, shake her. My sweet boy, still trying to be good. What do you want to do? I asked. I don't know, he whispered. I feel like an idiot, how did I not see this? How did I just let her handle everything? She showed me enough to keep me calm, you know? Look, the bills are paid. Look, the kids are fine. Look, I posted us on vacation. Everything's great. Abusers depend on your goodwill, on your desire to believe them.
On your love, he sniffed. Well, he said, clearing his throat. Love's looking a lot more conditional now. I didn't say good. I didn't say finally. I just listened. I'm going to stay with a friend for a few days, he said. I need space to think. Okay, I said. Do you want me to pick up the kids and keep them for a bit? He hesitated. She'll pitch a fit, he said. She thinks you're the enemy. Mark, I said gently, there is a difference between enemies and witnesses. He let out a long breath. I'll talk to her about it, he said. If she agrees, would you? Of course, I said. Any time. We hung up. I lay there in the dark and stared at the ceiling and felt a grim, quiet satisfaction settle over me like a blanket. The vine of anger around the cinder block of grief was flowering. 2 days later, I got a call from the head of the private school. They had, in their review, discovered that some of the documentation Kelsey had provided for scholarship consideration was not accurate. She had exaggerated Mark's income downward, inflated my refusal to help, and omitted the existence of the 529 accounts altogether. They were not pleased. They informed me, very carefully without violating any privacy laws, that the family's financial aid status was being reevaluated, and that any educational benefits financed through misrepresentation would have to be repaid. I thanked her for letting me know. I did not ask how Kelsey took that news, though I could imagine. A week after that, I got a letter from the 529 plan. They had temporarily frozen the accounts pending an investigation. They would be contacting Mark as the contingent owner to verify that he had not authorized the online changes in my name. A few days after that, Karina called me, gleeful. You'll never guess who just lost her payment processing account, she said. Apparently, too many chargebacks. Her business is dead in the water. How sad, I said, not even trying to sound sincere. Then the local boutique owner, a woman I knew from the library board, called me.
Is it true that Kelsey's been under some kind of fraud investigation? She asked delicately. She does our social media, and I'm concerned about the association. I can't comment on investigations, I said, feeling like a TV cop. But I can say that if I were running a business dependent on public trust, I would be very careful about the contractors I hire. She thanked me. 2 days later, Kelsey posted a rant about small-minded business owners who had fired me over rumors. The dentist's office quietly removed her handle from their website. The dominoes kept falling, and through it all, I did not have to lift more than a pen. She had built her life out of hollow image and theft. All I'd done was pull one thread and hand everyone a magnifying glass. The structure collapsed on its own. The trashcan incident became a particular point of fascination. Someone who'd been at the gathering, probably one of the pastor's kids who think privacy is a boomer concept, had filmed the whole thing. A short clip leaked in the group chat of the women's Bible study. From there, it oozed out into other circles. It didn't go viral, thank God. I don't want to be a meme. But it circulated enough that more than a few people saw a 65-year-old widow bent over in grief with a trash can shoved over her head by a laughing daughter-in-law. Context is everything. Once, that clip would have been framed as funny family moment. Now, after my quiet post, after the 529 freeze, after whispers of, "You know she lied to the school, right?" it hit differently. One of my church friends, Paula, took me aside one Sunday. "I just want you to know," she said, fierce, "if she ever sets foot in this building, she's going to feel the temperature drop." I laughed. "Don't bully her," I said. "Just don't let her bully me." "Oh, honey," she said, patting my arm, "I think that ship has sailed. People see her clearly now." I wasn't so sure. Abusers are slippery. But I knew this. She didn't control the narrative anymore. At least, not unchallenged. The final confrontation came like all big family showdowns do. Badly timed, in public, and during a child's event. Emma's dance recital. Mark called the week before. "Kelsey is insisting you not come," he said bluntly. "She says it'll create drama." I closed my eyes.
Do you want me there? I asked. Yes, he said without hesitation. So does Emma. She asked if Nana would see her twirl. Then I'll be there, I said. Kelsey could stew in her own juices. I arrived early, found a seat near the middle. The auditorium smelled like old popcorn and hairspray. I saw Mark come in with the kids. Emma spotted me, waved so enthusiastically her little glittery headband nearly flew off. Liam barreled down the aisle to hug me. "Nana," he yelled, "Mommy said you were busy, but you're here." "Of course I am," I said, hugging him. "I wouldn't miss it." Kelsey followed, stiff. She glanced at me, eyes narrow. "You came," she said. "I did," I said. "I was invited." She snorted and took a seat on the other side of Mark, as far from me as possible. We watched the first few numbers. Tiny ballerinas stumbled through routines. Parents clapped like they were at the Bolshoi. I recorded Emma's class on my phone, her little determined face making my heart swell. After her group, there was an intermission. Mark turned to me. "Can you watch the kids for a sec?" he asked. "I need to talk to Kelsey." My stomach tightened. "Of course," I said. They stepped into the aisle, then out into the lobby. I occupied the kids with snacks and whispered commentary about the other costumes. Liam was obsessed with a boy dressed as a frog. I couldn't hear what was happening outside, but I saw glimpses through the doors as people went in and out. Kelsey gesturing wildly, Mark standing, arms crossed, other parents surreptitiously watching. At one point, she pointed toward the auditorium, toward where I sat. A couple of heads turned to look. I met their gaze steadily. Eventually, voices rose enough that I could catch snatches when the doors opened. ruined my reputation, stole from our children. Your psycho mother. You humiliated her at Dad's funeral. That last one had come from Mark. Good, I thought. Say it out loud. Finally, Kelsey stormed back in, eyes blazing. She marched up the aisle and stopped right in front of me. You happy now? She hissed. The people around us fell silent in that way that says everyone is listening but pretending not to. Define happy, I said calmly. She shook, literally shook. You have destroyed my life, she said. You've turned my husband against me. You've poisoned everyone against me. Over what? Some stupid money you were never going to spend anyway? Because of you, my business is ruined. We might have to pull the kids from their school. And people whisper about me at church. That's not because of me, I said. That's because of your actions. I just made sure the right people saw them. She laughed, sharp and ugly. You're unbelievable, she said. You think you're some hero swooping in to save everyone from evil Kelsey. Newsflash, Marilyn, you're just an old, bitter woman who can't stand that her son chose another woman over her. There it was, the root. I stood up. My knees creaked, but my spine felt like steel. I have never asked my son to choose between us, I said quietly. You did, over and over. You made everything a tug-of-war. You tried to pull my grandchildren away from me. You lied about me. You stole from my husband's legacy. You humiliated me when I was most vulnerable. And you expected there would be no consequences, because there never have been. People were watching openly now. Emma peeked around the seat, eyes wide. I met their gaze steadily. I knelt slightly so I could look Kelsey dead in the eye. I am not perfect, I said. I have made mistakes. I can be stubborn. I can be judgmental. But I will not apologize for protecting my family from you. Not ever. She opened her mouth, but I held up a hand. And one more thing, I said. You put a trash can on my head at my husband's funeral. That alone makes anything I've done since feel like restraint. There was a smothered laugh from somewhere behind us. She flushed. That was a joke, she hissed. Everyone laughed. No, I said. They cringed, and some of them filmed it. Ask around. The world has seen what you are. You can either keep screaming about how unfair that is, or you can look in the mirror and do some hard work. But either way, I am stepping out of your line of fire. You don't get to target me anymore. She stared at me, stunned, as if she'd never considered that I might simply opt out. Mark came back in then, face drawn. Kelsey, we're leaving. She whipped around.
I'm not going anywhere, she said. Emma is going to finish her recital, he said firmly. Then I'm taking the kids to Mom's for the night. You can stay at your sister's. We can talk with lawyers present next week. Lawyers? She sputtered. You're going to sick lawyers on me now? You stole from our children, he said. You lied on official documents. There are already lawyers involved. This is me trying to make it less ugly. She looked between us, realizing, finally, that the roles had shifted. I was no longer the villain in this story. She was no longer the director. She screamed. Not words, just this raw, frustrated sound. Then she grabbed her purse, stomped down the aisle, and slammed the door so hard a banner fell off the wall. On stage, a little girl with a tutu froze, then kept dancing. The show, as they say, went on. That night, my house felt full for the first time in months. Emma and Liam slept in the spare room, sprawled under Tom's old Ohio State blanket. Mark sat at my kitchen table with a beer he barely touched. We talked, really talked. He cried, finally, for his father. Not the choked, hurried tears of the funeral, but the deep, gasping sobs of a son who had held it together too long. He apologized to me. For what I said at the lawyers, he whispered. For believing her. for not asking questions, for not stopping her at the house, for the trash can. I held his hand. I forgive you, I said. You were grieving. You were manipulated. You're human. He shook his head. That's not an excuse, he said. But thank you. We talked about money. I really showed him, the accounts, the retirement, the numbers. I wanted him to understand that we had not been hiding a fortune from him out of spite, that the charity donations were not some impulsive betrayal, but the culmination of years of conversation. I wish Dad had told me, he said, frustrated. So do I said. But I also understand why he didn't. He wanted your last months together to be about fishing trips and old stories, not about arguing over percentages. He rubbed his face. I get that, he said. I still feel cheated. Not by you, just by the whole situation. Like I was a kid again, hearing about decisions you made that affected me without me being at the table. That's fair, I said. You're allowed to feel that. He looked up surprised. You're not going to tell me to be an adult about it? He asked, a ghost of a smile. I told you that from a place of my own fear, I admitted. I was terrified that if I acknowledged your hurt, you'd side with her completely and I'd lose you. Turns out, I almost did anyway. We sat in that honesty for a while. So, what happens now? He asked, eventually. Legally, I said, you'll talk to your own lawyer about the fraud stuff. We'll work with Randall on the accounts. You and Kelsey will either find a way to repair this with a lot of therapy and boundaries, or you'll separate. Either path will be hard. For you, for the kids, there is no easy version. And for us? He asked. You and me? I thought about all those years of homework at this very table, of soccer cleats in the hallway, of late-night talks and slammed doors. I'd like to build something new, I said. Something with less unspoken expectation, more transparency. You're not a boy anymore, Mark. You're a man with your own family. I need to remember that. You need to remember that I'm not just the woman who packed your lunch. I'm a person with my own life, my own grief, my own choices. He nodded slowly. I can do that, he said. We clinked our glasses. Mine had tea. His had warm beer. It felt like a truce. Not a fairy tale reconciliation, but something real. It's been a year now. Kelsey and Mark are separated. The divorce is moving slowly, as they do. There are custody schedules and asset spreadsheets and more lawyer emails than anyone should ever have to read. The kids spend every other weekend with me. We bake cookies, we plant tomatoes. We talk, gently, about complicated things in simple words. Mommy says you hate her, Emma said once, frowning as she stirred batter. I don't hate her. I don't like some of the things she has done, but I don't hate her. Do you hate Daddy? She asked. Never, I said firmly, even when I'm mad at him. She considered this. Grown-ups are weird, she decided. Very, I agreed. The 529 accounts are intact now. What was improperly taken has been, in one way or another, restored. Some by direct repayment,
Some by adjustments in the divorce. I am still the primary owner, and we have tighter controls. I donate in Tom's name every year to the charities we chose. It still makes me sad that Mark isn't part of that process the way we'd hoped. But maybe someday, when the dust settles, he will be. As for Kelsey, her online presence has shifted. She still posts, but the tone is different. Less smug, more defensive.
Lots of quotes about rising from the ashes and surviving smear campaigns. Less about luxury, more about simplicity, now that she can't swing the private school or the leased SUV. People engage less. Some unfollowed quietly. Others stayed for the train wreck. I don't watch closely. I don't need to. I did what I set out to do. I dug up her dirty secrets and exposed them, not with spiteful gossip, but with documents and patience. I took back the narrative she'd stolen from me and handed it, gently, to the light. My revenge wasn't cinematic. There were no car chases, no dramatic court speeches. There was a widow with lettuce in her hair deciding that she'd had enough. There were phone calls and meetings and posts written with shaking hands and deleted 3 times before being sent. There was the slow, satisfying realization that I did not have to be the villain in someone else's badly written story. I still miss Tom, every day. Grief hasn't gone away. It's just moved into a side room of my heart and started rearranging the furniture. But alongside it now, there is something else. A quiet, steady sense of having finally stood up. At 65, in a room full of people who'd gotten very used to me ducking my head. Kelsey put a trash can on my head at my husband's funeral. I took it off. And then, carefully, methodically, I made sure everyone saw exactly who had been taking out the garbage all along.
My grandmother told me this story. Thanks for watching this video. Bye bye.